When I was 10 years old, we helped create this first organization that brings peace. I never in my wildest dream, Jake, thought that I will be a married man with a child who's 10 years old, Adam. Today he's 11. And we would still be deep in the gutter, deep in the mud. That for me, like, I have to change that. I need for my children and yours to have a different model, a better life. A life where they understand that their commonalities by far exceed their differences. I feel like I cannot afford being depressed, being angry, being not being productive. And it takes a lot of internal work. It takes me to, constantly remind myself that there are the Jacob Ner-Davids on the other side. Your presence, your values, your partnership, our fellowship is so important to me, because from that I also draw inspiration.
The blessings that we received, right, to get to know the other, puts a huge responsibility on us. And I know you've already articulated this. We know, right? And a lot of our neighbors just don't.
Yes.
They just don't. And that, for all the more so, for me to just sit at home or not, that, I was given this blessing. How could I not, move? Good morning, Forsan.
Good morning.
So we circled around each other unintentionally and then intentionally as we both became fellows at the Aspen Institute, but we didn't actually meet for a long time, even though I actually knew of your name back from when you were at the YMCA. But how did we actually meet?
So I think the first time we met, I've also heard your name all throughout, from, friends from the Aspen Institute. You've been very, very active socially, politically in Israel. But I think the first time I met you was you were on a treadmill in Hong Kong. I was with my friend and ex-business partner in Zaytoon Ventures. Zaytoon Ventures is a company that we created to bring Arab and Jewish, Palestinian, Israeli, create technology companies. And the vision was to create this interconnected Middle Eastern economy. And you were running, and your heart rate was so up, okay, that I noticed this guy is running. And then my business partner spoke with you, and he introduced us. I think that was probably 10 years ago.
Something like that.
Yeah,
something like that. And then you play hard to get, so
I do.
But lots of things happened in both of our lives. But you moved on from Zaytoon Ventures.
I did. I moved. We've done our investments there, and from there I actually tried to focus on Israel, private equity, and whatnot. But I think that's the first time we met in Hong Kong, and we circled around, and we didn't really get together physically until you invited me to your home in the kibbutz. That was an amazing visit.
When was that?
That was 5 years ago?
Right.
Remember that? And you gave a good Muslim what?
Wine.
Corrupted a good Muslim. Tell me, I'm
still a somewhat free. Somewhat free world.
Well, as long as it's free wine, I'll come to you and visit you. And you know what? I'll tell you, we can actually exchange your wine with my olive oil.
That we definitely should do. I remember talking to you a few times when you were off picking with your family.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, I drew actually inspiration from your wine story, because the wine story is very much like Zaytoon Ventures, which my friend and I created, right? And your winery is an Arab-Jewish.
I do have.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Jezreel Valley?
Well, so I do have one Palestinian Christian partner in the winery.
Yeah.
And he's the one who gave the name for the winery, for Jezreel Valley Winery, because he said Christians all over the world will know. You know him, Sami Abudaya.
Yes.
And like you, I've tried to do many things, right, to bring people together through business. And I think that's part of I think our shared kind of leadership story.
So speaking of, sorry to cut you off, but speaking of shared leaders, let's go back. Let's go back to basics. So, you're not this typical Israeli Jew. You're, way beyond that. You're an American. You grew up. I'm curious to know
You're not
your
typical
story.
Israeli Muslim, so I'm just putting that out there.
Well, so I'm really curious, JP. Oftentimes when I now that I've gotten to know you, and I am so interested in getting to know you even deeper and better. But so far, I feel like, we have so many shared values, yet you come from completely different background than, where I come from. And so I'm really curious. I'd love to know, let's go back to basics. Let's go back to your story. I'm curious, for example, about your parents, Who are they? How did you grow up? Where? How did you find yourself in Israel? And why all of a sudden, you're taking this peace agenda on your shoulders, you and your wife and your family, and look at you, here we're in Aspen, coming with 3 languages, peace. I'm curious. Share with me.
So, it's interesting. I didn't realize that I was growing up different. For me, it just felt very normal. My parents, they ended up being both academics, but they were very active in everything. Like, you didn't just complain about something. You did something, and they took me to protests and demonstrations. And I first came to Israel when
that was in America.
In America, growing up in New York, and my Zionism, if you will, was a very organic Zionism. It was the Holy Land, and this is where we come from, and pray 3 times a day to return. And then when I was 11 years old, we got on a plane and came to Israel for a 4-month trial period. And there were 2 things missing from my mother, 3 things missing from my mother, which is why we only stayed for 4 months. Air conditioning, ice, and my grandparents. My grandparents were back in Queens. So we didn't stay, but I got the bug. And sort of a deep connection to the land, and I knew that eventually I was coming back. And then I returned, I lied about my age, and returned to brief army service, and then went back to the States, and then back and forth, and then finally Chaviva and I came back, fully in the early 90s. So now it's been most of my life, living in Israel. Going back, though, in terms of what influenced me, and is that sense of, I'll quote another Henry Crown fellow that Josh Baer, who was actually, I don't think even realized, was quoting the famous Jewish philosopher Hillel, where Josh said, if not us, who? Who? And if not now, when? When? And I don't know if he realized he was even paraphrasing Hillel, but that's basically the way I was raised. So for me, it's just very natural, but I always have to, but I have learned, right, that I'm in the minority. Not necessarily the minority from a values point of view, that's a separate discussion. But I think in the minority, and then I'll flip it back onto you, in actually going to do something, right? Most people don't. Most people are not entrepreneurs. Most people don't step out of their box, right? So now I'll flip it back onto you. What gets you to step out of your box and lead?
Wow. Before I answer that question...
You're trying to avoid it.
No, but I am interested in the concept of you being a minority member, and I wonder how much really it influenced you in your empathy to minority members inside the state of Israel, people like me. So we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
But what influenced me, I think, look, I've always believed that to whom much is given, of whom much is expected. I feel that I am the luckiest man I know. I'm so blessed, thank God. I come from, a typical Palestinian family in Israel, Israeli Arab, Palestinian Israeli citizen. My family suffered the 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel. So in a way, back in 1948, you know the history. More than 512 Palestinian villages were either fully or partially destroyed during the war, and my family, were refugees. Most of them were in Lebanon. Some were in Jordan, some in Gaza, and some returned. And I'm, of the part of the family that actually returned to Israel early on, and we became citizens. So, but growing up, I grew up in a very one single narrative, which is, in a way, part of it is facts, part of it is, myths and stereotypes, and but I did grow up knowing that Jews are our enemy for what happened in 1948. But beyond that, right, I also grew up knowing that I'm a member of a minority inside the state of Israel from a very, very early on. As a young kid, would roam around the village, and my village is surrounded by 3 mountains. On top of each mountain, there's one Jewish moshav.
Right.
So as kids, you're shepherding your sheep or running around with your friends playing in these 2,000-year-old olive trees, and the Jews are right next to you, okay? But for me, that was the territory I could not enter. For me, everything I knew about Jews and Jewish Israelis is what I've seen as a child in TV, in the Arab media, be it, Jordanian, Syrian, Lebanese, and during I grew up during the 80s, during the Intifada,
right?
The first Palestinian, right? And so,
we're old.
We're old, but young at spirit.
Very young at spirit.
So for me, I always saw the ugliest images, if you will, of Israel, which is the occupation, violence, siege soldiers, beating up Palestinians, not allowing them to go to Al-Aqsa, the images of occupation and whatnot. You're all too familiar with it. So the stereotypes that I had in my mind were cemented only through the media, what I've seen. But, one day, early, when I was, 6, 7 years old, my sheep sneaks into the neighboring Jewish village, and I need to get the sheep. And it was really the first time I enter, and my stepping into that moshav opened my eyes completely, because for the first time I see how they live. The first thing I notice is that they live in such higher living standards than I do. 15 minutes away from them, I still don't have paved roads, no, even sewage system we didn't have, right? Whereas the neighboring Jewish village, wow, what did they not have? Paved roads, sidewalks, flour, I'm a soccer player, so, there was soccer field with grass in it. For us, we couldn't dream of that. And so that I knew that there's some but then I actually saw Jewish kids, and I swear to you, I had this image about Jews that simply came from all these stereotypes and the fact that I didn't really meet Jews. Again, the violence, the horns, all of that. And that was, I was shocked when a Jewish man approached me. He saw that there's an Arab kid there. And he approached me instead of, and I'm expecting the guy to be carrying a gun, because all Jews I've seen so far on TV were soldiers carrying guns. But he was so kind, he had, this tray of chocolate chip cookies, and he gave me one. And what I noticed is that, he looked exactly like my grandfather, a man with a beard, like you, a man with a kippah. That really changed my life. That was, in a way, I feel that was the first U-shift in my life, because only then did I start asking questions and questioning my own narrative. That really set me on that journey. A few years later, we created the first organization that supports peace and coexistence between Arabs and Jews. And I was very active in it until, 1996, we decided to take the first peace camp between Israel and an Arab country. So far, I was not impressed by this leaders' peace, like the peace agreement which we had between Israel and Egypt, where people are not interacting.
Right.
And so I decided that let's have actually a people's peace process. And so life works in such mysterious ways. One of my cousins, who was in Jordan, happened to be the bodyguard of King Hussein. And so in 1994, when the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan was signed, my father told me, listen, you have family in Amman. And so I contacted my cousin and said, look, I'd love to bring 50 Israelis, 25 Palestinian kids, 17 years old, and 25 Israeli Jews. And please, maybe the kingdom can sponsor this peace camp. And that's really how it started. We took that first peace camp, came back from Jordan, the first Jewish man I've ever met in my life, and interacted with the chocolate chip cookie. Shared with me that there is a scholarship that sends to Israeli citizens to Brandeis University, Jewish-sponsored university. And, he helped me apply for it. I had absolutely no dreams to come to the States for education, So that's really my journey. I feel very, very blessed. And, I feel like at every, intervention, every intersection, there was a divine intervention that led me into this. It's not like, I grew up thinking, well, I'm going to be this peacemaker or my mission in life is to bring, it just happened so. The more I learned about my own narrative, the more I learned about yours. And it was just something that drew me to it. In a way, I don't know, maybe it's the belief that, God gave us this piece of land to share it. And I think maybe in that kind of religious aspect, that faith, that spiritual aspect of it all, there is merit to that narrative. Which I'm sure you relate to it as somebody who's religious, and I'm curious.
Well, religious, but it's interesting because you talked, what does it mean to be a minority? And obviously, I come from the States where the identity that was very strong within me is a Jewish identity.
Yeah.
I was theoretically on a national level, right, was a minority. But funnily enough, my earliest upbringing was in a total Jewish bubble in Long Island, New York.
Yeah.
I only knew Jewish people.
Really?
The only non-Jewish people I knew was through my parents, particularly through my father, because he would introduce me to his friends from outside our little area, and his friends at the university, and he would express, his love for all of them, and so on. But I think that was unique in my upbringing, and my father would invite them home. So one of his best friends from the university was a guy named Mohammed Yusuf, who was an Egyptian American academic, and so on and so on. And so I think that was. I didn't realize how strange it was, but I was a minority, but I didn't feel like a minority, right? But in that, Jewish consciousness, there is the concept, obviously, post-Holocaust, that never again, and never again, be a minority that the worst can happen to. And part of that, it was obviously the political return. Again, I'm calling it the political return, because the spiritual return or even the physical return had, been happening for a lot longer.
Yeah.
But interesting in the sense of kind of connecting with people, and I'll tell a little bit from my own story, but then I'll put it back to you. For a while I wasn't seeking any of this, and I wasn't doing any of this. But just my natural curiosity, I was living in Jerusalem, and my natural curiosity was to get to know all of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And I'm a runner and a biker.
So when you moved to Israel, you actually went to Jerusalem?
Straight to Jerusalem.
First
Yeah, straight to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And we were living in Baca, and I began to explore all of Jerusalem, and I realized there was this line, right, which people didn't cross.
Yeah.
And I would cross it, and I would ride my bike, and I would run. And my typical run would take me, all around. And people said, you're crazy. Why are you running through those neighborhoods? Or why are you biking? I was like, they seem like nice people. So, why not? Why not? And so I got to know Jerusalem the way few people, get to know, because I would traverse back and forth all the time. But I wasn't really talking to people. I was just kind of more observing, right? Go for a long run on a Shabbat morning and come through Wadi Joz, and then move over into Rehavia, totally different things going on. Wadi Joz, it's Saturday morning. There's people going to work, they're going to school, they're whatever. So it was fascinating. But then in one of my startups it got to a little size, and I said, oh, wow, I can actually, reach out through in business connections. And so I started to make connections to people on a business level.
So you remember that first kind of meaningful intention, meaningful interaction with a Palestinian?
Yeah, you probably know him, Zahi Khouri.
Yes.
So, and we're still in touch. And I said, maybe through business I can create connections, and it was not good business right? The rest of the people in my company were like, why are you wasting our time, and so on. And I remember, again, going back to the peace agreements that people make, but then they forget the details. So there was a small detail. I had a technology company in the telecommunications space, and there was no country code that worked for Palestine. So you have 972 for Israel. We don't use these things too much anymore, but back then they were important when you made a phone call. Yeah. And I said, well, through technology, we can turn on a country code for Palestine overnight. We don't have to wait for the International Telecommunications Union and this and that, whatever. I could allow people to start, from a sense of pride to be able to call. Nice. And also have much cheaper phone calls and so on. So I developed early relationships with people at Paltel, and that's how I met Zai and a few other things. And, we started doing things, but then, politics always gets in the way. And things start to fall apart around you, and you lose control. And I'll tell you just one story, which I've never shared with you, which that led me to starting another company with somebody named Nasser Judah from Jordan, who at the time had just left, going back to His Majesty King Hussein, had just left his service to the king and was trying to do stuff in the private sector. And we got introduced, and we started this company together called Access Middle East to bring internet to throughout the Middle East. I was going back and forth to Amman almost every other week because that's where the based office. Yeah. And then, if you remember, Sharon goes to the Temple Mount.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. At the part of what began the Second Intifada, goes to the Temple Mount. And I was scheduled to be in Amman the following week. And Nasser calls me and says, don't come.
Let me ask you a question. When you go to Amman, were you always wearing the kippah?
Yeah,
Never took it off?
Yeah,
okay, good.
There were two people that would walk around Amman with a kippah on. Daniel Kurtzer, if you remember, he was in the State Department, the ambassador.
Yes.
He would wear a kippah, and I would.
Yeah.
Everybody else would take it off. So never had a problem. Yeah. There was one place where somebody asked me to take it off, but not in Amman, somewhere else. But he said, don't come. Things don't feel right, and the company then ended up falling apart because it was very difficult to raise capital for something in the Middle East as the Second Intifada started raging. Wow. And the whole thing kind of fell apart, which was sad, but those connections remain. I was in Amman last week and connected with Nasser. So, and that was 20 years ago. So I'm optimistic because of the connections, and that created on a personal level. Because I was blessed to have those connections get created and invest in them. And most people don't, you said how blessed we are, how blessed you are, and I'll say how blessed we are. Most people don't have that, right? They've never met. Even in Israel, as we both know, most Israeli Jews have never had a real conversation. I don't mean, how much is this, or, whatever. But I've never had a real conversation with a Muslim or a Christian. They just never do it. And certainly not in the West Bank or in Gaza. And I think by those connections getting created, you remind yourself, the expression in Hebrew, Kol echad nivra b'tzelem Elohim, right? Everybody is created in the image of God. And if you keep reminding yourself of that, then you say, my goodness, of course. So here's a question for you. Where do you draw your optimism from?
What a question. I mean, especially now, right, when things feel so darn bleak and hopeless, and yeah, I mean, at times, especially in the past 2 years, I've been feeling a bit hopeless and helpless, honestly. But like you, remind yourself that everybody is created in the image of God. I also believe in the in the fact that we're here to stay, all of us. We're not going anywhere. And the fact that if you are not part of the solution, then somehow you're contributing to the complexity of the problem. And I'll tell you what, I mean, there have been days for me, I think my maybe biggest disappointments, especially in the past couple of years since October 7th, have come from those relationships that are near and dear to me, the ones that are close. And that's why, I'm in a way, I'm curious how you actually maintain that deep connection with people. And maybe you didn't fall in the same traps that I did. I honestly, some of the closest people, some of the people who are activists, with me, business partners from the other side, Jewish Israelis. October 7th came and shattered so many, I would say, unspoken agreements and understanding between us, The fact that you realize, okay, maybe there's actually a gap. Maybe there aren't that many shared values in the end. For me, that was a major, major disappointment. And then I started asking myself, why? Why is that? Did we not dig deeper, or am I simply expecting, that this side will actually understand my narrative and have that level of empathy that I have towards them? I think it's a wrong expectation, by the way. And I think, the deeper the disappointment is because I expected differently.
What were they actually saying, or what were they doing that created that disappointment? In
a way, the fact that, look, October 7th was a traumatic event, I think, for all of us. I mean, I know so many Palestinians, of course, condemned the event in the loudest voices. I mean, this is from a human level. I mean, killing innocents, are you innocents? Are you kidding me? This is what we do. So, the level of empathy that I showed up and understanding and willingness to, I didn't see that from the other side. If anything, I saw in a way tones of accusations and tones of wanting to kind of push me to show my loyalty to an entity here. When in fact, this is a crime and we have to kind of rise above it. And especially somebody like me who's, spent my entire life, I'm 47 years old. Since I was 10 years old, I've been involved. 37 years of my life. Through social entrepreneurship, through nonprofits, through business like you. And so I feel like, there needs to be, we should have created a bond, okay, that will surpass any of these horrific events that happen and will continue maybe to happen in our region. Where do I draw my inspiration? Honestly, yeah, there were days where I felt a bit hopeless and helpless and disappointed and sad. And, you go through all the emotions, the anger. There's anger. But then again, I have 2 young children. One of my greatest inspirations is as follows. When I was 10 years old, we helped create this first organization that brings peace. I never in my wildest dream, Jacob, thought that I will be a married man with a child who's 10 years old, Adam. Today he's 11. And we would still be deep in the gutter, deep in the mud. So that for me, I have to change that. I need for my children and yours to have a different model, a better life. A life where they understand that their commonalities by far exceed their differences. And God gave us this piece of land to live, to share it, this could be heaven. I see the potential. You see the potential. Both of us actually are going to the Arab world. I've been blessed to have become an American citizen, so now I can actually go anywhere in the Arab world, as opposed to carrying my only Israeli passport. Right. You know the potential. And we see it. And so in a way, I feel like I cannot afford being depressed, being angry, being not being productive. And it takes a lot of internal work. And I think also it takes for me, and this is something, allow me to be vulnerable, it takes me to constantly remind myself that there are the Jacob Ner-Davids on the other side. Your presence, your values, your partnership, our fellowship is so important to me, because from that I also draw inspiration. And I know I can rely on you. I know you got my back, I got yours, because both of us want the same thing. Because both of us believe in these human values. We believe in the Palestinians' inherent right to have an independent state of their own, to live free, much like you want the same thing for Israeli Jews. And you, better than anybody else, understands the interdependency that we both have.
Sure.
You know, I think that's where I draw my inspiration from, and it's difficult. It's really difficult, especially when you look at your children, and you see these the sirens, you see the bombs, you see the violence, you see also the tragic images of what's going on in Gaza, of what happened on October 7th. It's just deeply painful. So that's really the fact that we're in this together. We ain't going anywhere, and if you're not part of the solution, you're somehow contributing to the complexity of this problem. Back to you. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
I'll reflect first on something in terms of what you said about some of the disappointment early on. One of my teachers in Jerusalem was somebody named Rabbi David Hartman, of blessed memory. And he was a path breaker in many ways. He wrote 11 books on Jewish philosophy and so on and so forth. But he also was outspoken in terms of politics. And he shared with us the following one time. He said, the New York Times often calls me right after there's a terrorist attack, and to get my reaction. And he says, it usually depends when they call me. And I said to him, Rav Hartman, what do you mean? He said, if they call me in the hour after the attack, I'm, let's wipe them out, let's, we've got the iron fist, we have to react, and, the old Jabotinsky, If they call me a few hours later, I'm kind of calmed down. If they call me the next morning, I'll be talking about peace.
Wow.
And that's the only way forward.
Wow.
So he said, it really depends when they call me.
Yeah.
And he said, because I'm human, we're all human.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, had their own gut reactions. I didn't. I don't know. I'm wired differently. I didn't. But I had very strong reactions to during the day, and also because at the time I had certain responsibilities, so I was kind of caught up in all of that, and in the days following. But and the interconnectedness that you talk about. One of the first calls that I made on October 7th. Remember, it was a holiday. It was I don't usually use my phone, but everybody kind of went into action. But one of the first calls I made was to the mayor of Kfar Manda, that is a town, the large town, right.
It's your neighbor.
No, my neighbor, right down the road from us, which, as you know, is a classic Muslim town.
Yeah.
But it's complicated, right? So I called him to make sure that nothing would that there would be no shock waves, in our area.
Yeah.
He said, Jacob, what do you, we're in this together.
Yeah.
Like, of course, of course. And he said, and on top of that, I don't think you even realize, you who are like, as we say, Ben Bayit, you are like a, however you translate that, you will, come to Manda all the time. You're a son of the, of Manda
community. Yeah.
He said there are 200 soldiers from Manda these days, which I did not know.
I didn't know either. That's a lot.
I knew there were people doing national service.
Yeah.
I had met them. I had seen some soldiers, but I didn't know. I thought it was 2, 3. I didn't know it was that many. So it's complicated, right? There's so many, wow.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there are many people in Manda who have family in Gaza.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wonder, if the reaction also of the mayor himself, would have changed now 2 years into it or a year and a half into it.
Oh,
now knowing that the situation has gotten so dire in Gaza.
First of all, it has. But I mean, I talked to him.
Yeah.
It had. But I think for all of us, in the initial days, that's why I go back to what Rav Hartman said. In the initial days, there was the initial days. But once you get, past that, in terms of my own optimism or my own inspiration or what, is very much obviously in line with what you said. I have 7 children that I've raised. They're all Israelis. They consider themselves much more Israelis than they do Americans, even though they all have American citizenship. And my parenting role, I see, and I think you share the same thing, is how do I impart, those values to them of respecting every person for who they are. And I think we've done a pretty good job.
I know
my kids are older than yours, but
I know from stories of your family. I know that you've done an amazing job.
I think we're doing well so far. But in terms of I think the blessings that we received, right, to get to know the other, puts a huge responsibility on us. And I know you've already articulated this. We know. Right, and a lot of our neighbors just don't.
Yes.
They just don't, and that, for all the more so, for me to just sit at home or not that, I was given this blessing. How could I not, move from within that?
Yeah, but it has to be difficult, right? Because it has to be sometimes, even your neighbor. Right? I mean, very much like some of my own siblings.
I and Chaviva are called, traitor.
There you go. You're a traitor. And much like, I'm sure, some people look at me as also a traitor.
For sure.
What are you doing with, this empathy, this level of empathy to the Jews, the Israelis, the occupiers, the vicious, you're right. But, we have to see beyond that. One of the things that, inspired me the most, it was just a few months ago when one of the Israeli Arab towns, Tamra, was hit by a missile from Iran. And there were 3 women who passed away. By the way, one of whom was actually a peace activist.
I knew the family. Yeah.
And I called you. We were supposed to meet, I don't know what. And then no, Forsan, I'm actually coming to Tamra to pay condolences. And again, you're a Jewish Israeli coming to this Arab town when in fact so many Jewish Israelis were saying, they were celebrating the fact that, the missile...
There were some.
There were some.
Yeah.
Okay, in social media. And I'm wondering,
social media, I don't,
to me, that was an act of the most beautiful act of humanity.
Thank you.
And man, how do we, we need so many of those. Did you get any pushback on you going to Tamra?
No, I think, well, first of all, I tend to hang out with like-minded people most of the time. Not always. I do try to expose myself to people who think differently, which is important as well. Let me ask you a question, because the whole attempt we did, or a few attempts that we did within the wider fellowship to kind of go back to the concept of shared values within the fellowship, and specifically, our connections through Aspen. I'd like to think that we would have been connected anyway because we were in parallel lives, but there is the Aspen connection. What did you expect, but more importantly, what do you expect going forward from that Aspen connection, from that fellowship?
Our fellowship. I expect that people who went through this fellowship, that we have this bond, that we, went through this journey together, and that journey is supposed to deepen the trust and the understanding between us, and increase our agency, and so that was, my expectation. Though I was a bit, surprised when, you see so many just angry voices, and as if we really kind of are not really seeing the other for who the other is. That was a bit surprising for me. But, clearly the expectation is that, hey, we're all in this together. We should all simply focus on the end result, on what we want to achieve and accomplish, and not be bogged down by these they're not little, but these sad events, these, political demagogues who are trying to take us in different directions. And I feel like we've, at some point, maybe succumbed to the to the sad reality where we simply cannot control much, okay, and we let ourselves be drawn into the us versus them. That is a problematic territory for me,
right.
Because I think through this fellowship and through everything that we've gone through, we should know better than we should redefine who the us versus them. And I feel, we need to touch those painful incidents, these difficult conversations. We need to have them. And I think we're well equipped to do that with active listening and with empathy, with understanding that, we have different narratives, but again, we have so much more in common. That is something I expect from the fellowship. I expect that this conversation will be not just between Forsan and Jacob, but between so many others. And I don't know if we're there.
I don't know if we're there. I'll tell you in terms of my own experience through the fellowship, post October 7th, but not only, but certainly as it flared up post October 7th.
Yeah.
And what I expect, what I expect is that the fellowship should create, and I think it does, but we just forget it sometimes, that there is no us and them, that we are all us, or we're all them, however you want to put it. But there isn't an us and them, and that we really are looking toward, I don't know if you ever got to meet Keith Berwick.
Oh my goodness! Not only did I meet him, but at the time, my Ami Dror, Henry Crown Fellow, right, my ex-partner in Zaytoon Ventures, we hosted a group, and Keith and rest in peace. Keith and his wife came, and they were part of the group, and then Ami and I, we did an entire Israel-Palestine journey for the participants. So I've gotten to know Keith well.
And Keith was a big influence in my own life over the past
Is that right?
22 years. And, Keith's one of his kind of well-known, lines is, from success to significance, and he has many other incredible lines. But part of it was creating the sense of we are all us, or we are all them. We are, let's dig down and find that humanity that we all share. Yeah. And he had an incredible gift for doing that. I think that people going into their corners, almost like in a boxing match or whatever, post October 7th, is because it was a display of inhumanity in a concentrated form, right? It wasn't dribs and drabs, which, sadly, you and I are fully aware of those kind of many drops of inhumanity that we see on a daily basis. Right. But this was like a in one moment, and caused people to forget that common, humanity. Even the people who were, committing that horror, right? They were led to do that for a variety of reasons. But you have to kind of believe in the essential, humanity of every person. So my expectation from the fellowship was that I think if you recall, I kind of jumped forward to try and create a text, because we always did text-based things. So I said, well, let's create a text, and it was I actually was inspired by my friend Brett Hurt, who's another Henry Crown Fellow, who was coming at it from a very specific American Jewish perspective. But I said, let's create at least a document that we can all, at least this, let's just do a few points that we can all agree on. Yeah. And we created such a document, and we came into the Action Forum last year. We were greeted with disdain and, oh, it's a bunch of Jews who created this document, which was true. It was a bunch of Jews who had created the document, but it was an offering to the commons as something to discuss. And I said, you know what? Optics are all too important, but perhaps it's not only optics. Let's, maybe if it hadn't, maybe there were other voices so I went on this, journey, and it ended up being creating a wonderful relationship for me with Kindi, who's another Meli fellow.
Yes.
And we worked to create a a common, document. And then we got it to a point, and we presented it back to people. And we realized that sometimes you can be on a leadership journey, and then you forget everybody else. Mm-hmm. And they weren't involved and created this document. So we got to something, Kindy and I, that we loved. We had spent hours and hours, creating this language and talking each other through it, and him understanding where I was coming from and me understanding where he was coming from, and so on, and finding the commonality. Yeah. And then we brought it back, and I brought other fellows, from I would just call it the Jewish identified fellows, brought it back. Oh, I can't sign that, and he brought it back, and he got similar pushback. So it's, our expectations, I think, need to be calibrated, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I remember you calling me, and you sent me the document, said, Forsan, let's work on this document. I was in a different
headspace, yeah.
In a very, very different headspace. And I think part of it, Jacob, is because I've done a bunch of these documents. Way back when I was still in college, we wrote these peace agreements, the Bostonian agreements. I feel like, I'm done with this writing something that's not going to go anywhere. And I feel now less guilty, okay, because at least, me not working with you in a way somehow led you to working with Kinda.
Yeah.
Or Kindy.
Kindy.
And you've developed this wonderful relationship with him. But you're right. I think when it comes down to matters of peace, I think one of the most important principles that I've learned early on in my own skin, how important it is that shared ownership. You cannot, as a Jew, you cannot impose peace on me. And you cannot bring that peace, on your own terms. No. Need to be a part, an integral part of that process from the thinking, not even just the action, like from the very, very first beginning. So speaking of which, of peace agreements and of shared ownership and of where do you think we're heading? What do you think needs to be done? Okay, because again, we do believe, I'm a big, big believer in, the people's, in two tracks type of peace. A people's peace process that starts from the bottom up, and that is geared towards changing and shifting the mindsets and the hearts of people to wanting, to accepting, to having empathy, to understanding that we're all in this together. Okay, and there's an inherent interdependency through shared values and through shared future. That's track A. I don't think we can actually have a people's peace process without the leaders. And I also don't think we can have, a sustainable peace that only stays on that top level of leadership. Again, look at what Israel and Egypt. That's not peace. Maybe that's lack of,
lack of war.
Lack of war. So clearly, Jacob, I don't think we've been in a worse place. Where do you see things are heading? Be it from the Israeli Jewish side or just generally, as somebody who understands both narratives, who's lived, and active. Again, you and I, we serve on the same board of the same organization, the Jerusalem Youth Chorus. And from there, I know you and I, draw inspiration.
Sure.
It's important to us. But, beyond the Peace Chorus and beyond the organizations that, you're active in, where do you see us heading? What needs to happen?
Sadly, I think that we need to take responsibility on both levels, meaning if we don't also get our hands dirty on the political side, then the people's we'll do a lot of the people stuff, which is important, but then terrible things will get committed by the political leadership, which is what we're witnessing.
Yeah.
What we're witnessing today. So I think we can't compartmentalize, which is I think a lot of us have done. Many people have said to me over the years, why are you not more active in politics? And I said, because it's dirty and it's a swamp and I wouldn't want to be involved in that.
Yeah.
So I much prefer more productive type work. But that means we leave that to people who are not operating from the same place that we're operating out of.
Right.
So what one answer is, I think we all need to take much more responsibility for the political side as well, because while true change, I agree with you, needs both, but you can't have both if one doesn't exist, particularly the one that sadly can create much more horror and tragedy. So we have that responsibility.
Yeah.
I think as in the wider, context, Kindi kept, saying in a lot of the conversations, both one-on-one, but a lot of group things, we as a fellowship, right, we're a half degree removed from people who wield a lot of political power, right? Why aren't we lobbying them? If we do come to, and this will go back to some of those documents that you created many years ago, if we, can create these shared values and shared directions and so on, we need to take them and do something with it, and talk to the people that, just from my Henry Crown class alone, there are 2 senators. I mean, we need to act. So I think that, we're here at the Action Forums. We need to act.
What's amazing is that, these documents that, for example, you produced recently or back, I know I produced 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that they remain as relevant as ever.
Sure.
Because we know what the solution is.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, so, we have here 3 people, cameras and whatnot, and they're saying stuff to us. I see that the hour's done.
Right.
I feel like, I'm going to leave this conversation hungry for more. I can't believe, guys, 45 minutes just passed. Can we have another 45 minutes?
We'll do it.
All right.
Ya Habibi.